Yo everybody, so we're back with the third and final installment of our player tier list series for the 2022 season. It's going to be the same format as the previous two, but this time it'll be for flex and main supports. We're going to combine both just to get it over with, and yeah, we'll go from there. Same exact thing as the last few ones. So first up we have Admiral. And I think Admiral overall was pretty underrated. I've always said that I thought that the London backline was one of the more integral parts of why they're successful. But he doesn't always get the love he deserves, maybe because he doesn't play the flashiest position in the world. But Admiral was pretty good, definitely above average. I think I'd probably put him in the B range somewhere. Next, we're going to have Aim God. In Aim God, again, probably not Admiral range. Pretty average. I'd say probably the best season we've seen out of him since like season 2, but it's not saying much. The bar wasn't that high. I thought he was just mediocre. The Philly backline in general was rather weak. He had some okay performances with the Ana and the Zen at times, but I felt rather unimpressed by Aim God, so I'm going to go ahead and put him in the C range. Third up, we have Animo. And this might surprise some people, but I thought Animo was pretty good in 2022 for the Florida Mayhem. I'm not going to sit here and tell you he was out of this world and he was like one of the best players on the team, but he was consistent, he was reliable, he stayed out of trouble, he did well on the Lucio and whatever else was asked of him. The only thing, I'd say probably the drawback with him is there were times where they decided not to play him, where they would instead opt to play Majed on Lucio because of style differences or whatever it might have been. So I don't really think you can rate Animo super high, but I still do think he was slightly above average, so probably like a B-. Next is going to be Ansoonjae. Don't let the Toronto attire fool you. This is him. This is the only picture I could find. That's at least kind of recent. I thought Ansoonjae was pretty alright. He helped the NYXL backline be the best it was on the year. Not that really says much. I think Ansoonjae was pretty average. I'll give him a C tier. Next is Aztec. Aztec, I think, had his moments. It seemed like Vancouver, for the most part, preferred Skairipa. I know in the Summer Showdown, Aztec got a lot of moments in the spotlight, and he did relatively well. But I wouldn't really consider him anything better than, Aim God, so C. This is Bebe, and let's just be honest, Bebe was awful. The Dragons, whenever they played him, they just lost. Can't really explain it in any other way. Whenever they subbed LeeJaeGon out to play Bebe instead, double flex support, they were a noticeably worse team. Bebe severely decreased their stock and their potential. I thought he's one of the worst supports overall in the league, so D tier for Bebe. Next is going to be Chio, and Chio's a pretty easy S tier. He was one half of the best backline in OWL, in my honest opinion, on Dallas Fuel alongside Fielder. His Lucio was out of this world. His Brig was good. He could even flex onto the Zen a little bit. Chio could do no wrong, and he even won a Roll Star for his efforts. Arguably one of the best main supports in the league. And what I like is that Chio could take initiative. That's maybe an underrated aspect of why he was so good for the Dallas Fuel. When they were in trouble, he'd come in and oftentimes save the day with a bunch of plays all by himself that he'd form out of thin air, especially on the Lucio on control maps and whatnot. Very aggressive and smart player at the same time, so Chio's a pretty easy S tier. Next will be Chorong, and Chorong's not a guy who got talked about enough in my eyes. Again, main supports aren't exactly easy to always locate, considering how unflashy they are compared to other positions, and Toronto is also pretty up and down, so maybe Chorong couldn't get as much love as he should have gotten. But if you really paid attention to his play, he's probably around the A range. His Lucio was pretty solid. I really enjoyed his Brig. I think his Brig was very underrated. Whenever Toronto played Brig and he got the opportunity to play her, I felt like they're really hard to stop, especially on defense. Him and Twilight were a solid duo together. Big Chorong fan, so A tier. Next, this is who? Coldest. Coldest wasn't very good when he did play. They replaced him with Molly. I was very unimpressed by Coldest. I thought he was one of the weakest links on Valiant when he did play. And he, because of how he played, it probably costed Valiant some games down the stretch early on. So I'm going to say Coldest gets a D tier. Next is Creative. Creative is a really difficult one because I've always been of the belief that he is a little overrated. I don't think he's the most flexible support player in the world, and he's maybe a little inconsistent. Sometimes he goes quiet, other times he's very noticeable, like the Kickoff Clash tournament and the playoffs. He was excellent in both of those metas. On the things he specialized in, you could always count on Creative to show up. It's just in between he wasn't very good. But just thinking about his peaks, you probably have to put him either upper B or lower A. He's one of the best Kirikos in the playoffs, one of the better Ana players. It's just outside of that, is that enough to keep him in the A range? I'm going to say probably, yeah. I'll put him like A-. He's like B+, A-. I'll put him there for now. Maybe we'll change it after. Crimzo, a guy that's always very consistent. I think on a better team, he would have been able to shine a bit more. But Boston were very up and down, but he made the most of it. Something I like about Crimzo is he's always going to be reliable, no matter the meta. Statistically, he's always top tier every single year. That carried over into Boston with Ana, Zen, Bap. Crimzo's just a great all-around player, and I love him to death. And I very well think you could argue that he's like in the A range. I'll probably put him B+, though, because, I don't know, maybe it's because he played on Boston, but I'm going to say he's either B+ or A-. This will be Dridro, the guy who got replaced along with a lot of other Eternal players. I think you could maybe argue Dridro was like low C when he did play. I don't think he was that bad. It's just the Eternal were terrible in general, so it's hard to give him much of a high rating at all. Maybe I'll be respectful and give Dridro like a C-. We can change it after, depending on how the rest of these rankings go, which I am winging, by the way. Faith, if any of you have watched my channel for a while, you know I'm not the biggest Faith fan. I think he's really, really average. Like, he just exists. He's never going to be the worst support in the world. He's not always going to be the guy you point out and say, this guy sucks, he's throwing your games. But you're also never going to point him out and say, wow, without him, we wouldn't be able to win these games, you know? He just exists. And for existing, he's probably like smack dab in middle of C, you know? That's what happens when you just exist and don't really contribute much. But he could be worse, so yeah. Farway 1987. This is what I've been thinking about for a long time. I think he was underrated. If you watched my underappreciated player video, you know that I thought he didn't get enough love for the charge. Really intelligent positioning. The numbers don't really stand out that much with him, and I still generally think he was one of the weaker links on Guangzhou. But with that said, I think he was still pretty reliable and a very smart player. And I do think he was better than Aim God, and honestly, I might even consider putting Farway like at a B-. So that's where I'll put him for now. Fielder is going to be our next candidate, and I mean, this one's pretty straightforward. S tier easily. In my opinion, the best support player of 2022. And just over the last few years, he's arguably been the best support in the entire world. Maybe you could argue, you know, like some of these other people later down the line are slightly better. But I think it's very hard to go against Fielder due to his consistency, his really high healing output, arguably the best Kiriko in the playoffs for a lot of people, one of the best Ana players in the league. Fielder is just so insane at everything he does. Good playmaker, even better healer and support. Just an absolute god. Nothing else to say in that regard. Now for Finn. Finn's tough because I think you can really make a strong argument he is like a S-, A+ player. There were some inconsistencies at times. I think he also had some really high peaks. I wasn't that impressed with him in like the playoffs, let's say, but generally I was a big fan of his Ana. And when he played Zen and whatnot, and even his Breg was pretty alright, made some pretty intelligent plays on that hero. Sometimes his ultimate usage wasn't the greatest, but I do think Finn should have been a role star in my honest opinion. I think that Izayaki robbed him. That's my personal thought on it. I'm going to say Finn's S-. He's probably a tier between S and A if I'm going to be honest with you, but I'm too lazy to change it. I'll say Finn's a solid S- / A+. Fixa will be our next boy, and I thought Fixa was one of the weakest links on the Fusion. I thought he would have been better than what he was, to be honest with you, because I thought he was a pretty decent contenders player, but he just didn't really show me much during his 1-year tenure on the Fusion. A lot of inconsistencies. A lot of mistimed ultimates, like with sound barriers and whatnot. I always felt like the timing was missing a bunch of the time, and he didn't really progress and learn as much as he should have. I just felt like there was more to give, and he failed. So let's say Fixo is a C. I'll put him... do I think Faith is better? Yeah, they're about the same, really. I'll say Fixo's probably, like, Faith level. Around there. That sounds about right. Next is going to be FunnyAstro. And due to him being mostly a Lucio specialist, I don't know if I'd feel comfortable putting him in the S range, but the one job that he did have, he was awfully good at. I'll give him that. His aggressive Lucio won the Gladiator some crucial games. He was a big part of both of their tournament runs. One of their most consistent players for sure. A big-time in-game leader. Really smart, really strong. One of the best Lucios in the game easily. So you got to give Astro an A tier. No doubt about it. Gangnamjin. It really depends on how you want to look at him. If you want to look at him as just a main support, definitely D. He was really bad at main support. It's not his fault. He shouldn't have been playing that position to begin with. It's not his natural role. Not his fault. But if you include flex support, he was pretty okay. He mostly played main support, though, which is something to keep in mind. But I do think that he had some redeeming qualities when he played Zen and whatnot. So I'll give Gangnamjin like a C-, mid-C. He should probably be in D, but I feel bad for the guy. It's not his fault. I'm a big Gangnamjin fan. Ho1. Also sorry that he randomly has, like, letters and numbers over his thing. For whatever reason, the Overwatch League just didn't have a profile picture for him, so I had to improvise. Regardless, Ho1 really didn't make much of a difference. I thought New York were worse with him at flex support compared to Gangnamjin. So I'll give him a D. Very uninspiring and unimpressive. Iris is going to be our next boy. Ignore that he's in a Houston jersey. I know he finished in Seoul, but this is what we got. I thought Iris was really good the entire season. I mean, playoffs, he could have been a little better, but you know what I mean? For the most part, on like a game-to-game basis, he was reliable both on Houston and on Seoul. His Ana was out of this world. His BAP is still solid as always. And I think it's impressive that he played well for multiple rosters, He looked good on Houston, got benched permanently over there, moved over to Seoul, and immediately made a difference there too with some clutch plays with the Ana and enabling Smurf and Profit and whatnot. So I think Iris should definitely be in the A range. I think he was a bit more consistent than Creative, but I do think Creative had better peaks. And, Creative helped win some more significant games. So I'm going to give Iris an A-. This will be Irony, and Irony's just mid. I saw potential early on, like kickoff clash for sure, but in his own words, his confidence started to waver as the season went on, so we saw him less and less, and his consistency wore off. So I'm going to give Irony like a solid C. I guess I could put him like smack dab between like Faith and Fixo. Maybe a little above Fixo or Aztec maybe as well. And we'll put Irony like around here. Sure. Izayaki, a guy who I thought had a little bit of an overrated season. I feel like the media really hyped him up when he just wasn't as good as like 2020 or 2021. Still good, just I think a little overhyped. And in my opinion, he robbed some other more worthy candidates of a role star. So I don't feel comfortable putting him in S. He's obviously still an A-tier flex support. His Zenyatta was cracked as always this year. He definitely was not a problem for Shanghai. Probably one of their better players still, I think Izayaki's probably an A tier. Do I think he's better than Astro, though? I mean, he definitely he serves more purpose than Astro. So I'll probably give Izayaki like an A. Kaan, I don't remember doing much. Like, it's weird. On Paris, he was okay. They sucked. Can't do much there. But then on London, he did show some promise as well on Zen. I think even like a player of the match or something, if that really makes a difference. So I'll give him a C for that reason. I feel pretty comfortable throwing Kaan in a nice C. Maybe like above Gangnamjin. Krillin. Those ears, though. Krillin, another guy I think it was a little underrated for the Justice, had to come into a tough situation. He wasn't supposed to be their guy. He was there as a filler until Vigilante turned 18, but then, the budget stuff happened, the roster drama with the Justice, so he became the starter again. And anytime he actually got to play, I thought Krillin did a pretty good job, for what it's worth. I mean, he was still just average, but he had some clutch moments, especially like in tournaments, like against some pretty big notable opponents like Shock and Dallas. So I think that's probably good enough to give Krillin a C. I think C is perfectly fine for him. He was just average, but I did think he had some good bio-nades with Iana and some good sleeps, so we'll give him a C. Admiral, again, another underrated aspect of the London Spitfire. Admiral was an absolute monster of a player, I thought. He was really consistent from start to finish. His Kiriko, one of the best in the playoffs, easily, IMO. His Baptiste was also absolutely insane. Whatever the meta was, he adjusted accordingly and kept guys like Hottie alive to enable them. Without this London backline, people like Hottie, Sparker, and Backbone, they're just not what they are. Landon, I thought, could hang in there at the best of the best, and I thought he was arguably even better than Crimzo. I think it's pretty fair to give Landon an A tier, especially because of how he played towards the end of the season in the playoffs. So maybe we'll give Landon like around here-ish. I think that's pretty fair for Landon. Maybe like bottom of A. I think he's probably in the A range, though. Something like this, Anyway, Lastro. Lastro's a toughie. Because I appreciate what he did on the Outlaws, going in there, mostly playing main support when that's not his natural role, and looking pretty decent on the Lucio, and more specifically, his Brigitte was out of this world and does not get nearly enough credit. It was absolutely nutty during the Summer Showdown. And on top of that, there were moments where he'd move back onto flex support to play like Zen or Ana and things like that. So for all of that, for that reliability and that flexibility, I think Lastro is quite arguably an A-tier player. Maybe a B+, but I'm leaning slightly more towards A- right now. Maybe that's just my opinion. I've heard a lot of people say he's overrated and he played bad in the playoffs, but I think in general Lastro was a very reliable piece of the Outlaws, and they wouldn't be where they are without him during that season. Next will be LeeJaeGon, who, in my opinion, had maybe a slightly better season than Izayaki, but unfortunately, Izayaki's the one that won a Roll Star, so I don't know how biased I can be in that regard. It's my list, but still, it's hard to argue LeeJaeGon's higher when it's clear that the public would disagree with me. LeeJaeGon was good, and I think he was the glue that helped keep Shanghai together. There were moments where he fed for sure, but that's just how LeeJaeGon does. That's him. He's a feeder. That's always been his style of play, and the Dragons have always found a way to succeed around it. There's been a lot of Lucio-heavy metas in 2022, and LeeJaeGon always stepped up to the plate. And during that time when he, anytime where Bebe would come in, the Dragons looked pretty lost without him. I really think they needed him to be what they were and to be at their most competitive. And whenever they were winning and playing well, he was there at the forefront, making massive plays. So I would argue that he is probably in the A range. I'd maybe a little lower than FunnyAstro, perhaps. Around there. He was really good. More flexible than FunnyAstro, yes. But, around the same skill level. You could argue Astro, fed less and was just as impactful. So we'll do something like that. This is Lengsa. I thought Lengsa was very, 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 very mid and one of the weaker parts of the LA Valiant for, again, kind of like Faith, simply just existing. But he also did make some mistakes at times, so I'm just going to go ahead and put him at low C. Lep of the Houston Outlaws. He played for all the Summer Showdown. Lastro was the real standout on the back line during that time, in my opinion. But Lep kind of, stood out of the way. Didn't make a lot of mistakes. Played smart when he needed to. So for that, I'll give Lep a C. Nothing out of this world, and outside of that one meta, I didn't really play. So it's hard to judge him off of one meta, but when we did see him play, he was just fine. This should be Lucamino. That's no offense to the Eternal, but, you know, they were just bad. There's no other way to explain it. So I'm just going to go ahead and throw him in D. Maybe he can prove himself in 2023, but that's just how it goes. Next shall be Masa. And Masa definitely saw a bit of a fall off compared to 2022, or excuse me, 2021. Where he kind of had a comeback year, and now he was kind of back on the downward trend. It was clear he wasn't having as much fun, which of course led to his retirement this year. I thought he was probably an okay player for Vancouver. Definitely not their best. Didn't really contribute to many wins. Pretty mediocre. So I'll give Masa a C. MCD. So MCD was more of like the guy that would come in if double flex support was relevant. Other than that, you know, they preferred Faith Crimzo. He was the third option for sure. He had some moments on the Zen where he really popped off, where the team would pocket him, Crimzo would nano him, and he'd do his thing. But it's not enough to really warrant a high placing on a tier list like this. So I'm going to say MCD's probably like a C, you know, around like Masa level. Yeah, that's where we'll put him. Monk. Monk, I think, another very underrated, underappreciated player. I think Monk deserves a solid B, maybe like above Animo. I thought Monk was honestly really clutch for Chengdu, and outside of their DPS, I thought he was their most important player easily. He had some really clutch moments in like map 5s against big rivals with the Ana, big sleeps, big bio-nades, even big kills. Very flexible player for them. Did as much as he could, you know, without a lot of help. I felt like he suffered from not having the right main support partner next to him. It should have been Xerneas, but then, you know, things happened with roster drama and budgets, so he was out of luck. But for what it's worth, I thought Monk did pretty good in a pretty terrible situation. Molly. Molly's pretty underrated as well, and I think quite arguably a B-tier player. I think, you know, outside of the DPS shining, you know, Marvel from time to time as well, Molly was a pretty important aspect of the Valiant turning their season around and almost making the play-ins. I thought that, you know, compared to when they played Coldest, it was just a night and day difference. Molly was really solid on the Zen and the Ana. He did what he could. It was hard for him to stand out just because he was on a Valiant team that was very inconsistent. But I'm going to give him a B-, honestly. I think Molly did pretty okay. I think people underestimate his impact for the Valiant in 2022, so we'll put him in B. This is, I'm drawing a blank, Myeongbong. Oh, it hurts me to do this because, you know, looking back at it in 2020, he seemed like he was going to be the next big thing, but Myeongbong was bad. Like, really bad for NYXL. I feel bad for him because he, you know, for those of you who follow Twitter, if he kind of got done dirty by that post coming out, that goodbye post when he didn't even know he was leaving the team really at the time. Like, he got done dirty in that regard. Feel bad for him. But nonetheless, he was pretty bad outside of like a couple of games on the Ana. It kind of sucks that they forced Gangnamjin to play flex support or main support over him, because the team probably would have done better the other way around, but maybe that's just me. But yeah, Myeongbong was pretty terrible, and it's kind of understandable why they'd get rid of him in favor of people like Ho1. Neko. Neko was a mid-season pickup. Well, not even a pickup. He was on the team as a coach, but became a player coach for the Hangzhou Spark. Don't really understand still why they felt it was so necessary to get another main support in there when Superich was like just okay. And Neko was honestly a downgrade. I thought the team played worse when he was in there. And that experiment very quickly came to an end because of how poorly the Spark played with him leading the helm at that position. The Neko gets a pretty easy D tier. Next is Nisha. Nisha I thought was just okay. Pretty average player. Nothing special. He's like around the Faith Fixo level. It's like the same thing. So, where he's just like okay, like looked okay in the Mercy and the Lucio. He did flex as well onto like Zenyatta and like, no, not Zen, Ana, that's what I'm thinking of, which I can appreciate. But nothing out of this world. So, I'll give him a C. This is OGE. OGE, I was honestly a little disappointed in. Maybe it's just because I put my expectations too high, but just based off of his past and how good he was in Contenders, you know, him and UV together, I was expecting more and I didn't really get it out of him. I felt kind of let down by what I saw from OG. He wasn't bad. I'm not going to sit here and say he was bad. You could maybe even argue ever so slightly above average. But when I watched him play, it wasn't what I was hoping for. His Lucio was fine. His flexibility maybe wasn't that great. The team benefited, obviously, when they got Vigilante to play Zen and whatnot. It's not really his thing. Not his fault there. But I thought he was just all right. So I'll give OG a B-. This is opener. I don't recognize all the faces. I apologize. Opener, pretty mediocre. Some might even argue he is D tier. I don't know if I'd be that harsh, because I think at least early on he showed a tiny bit of promise, but it really wasn't much. So he's just going to go directly into C. Not much of an opinion there. Definitely, you know, like the weakest part of Washington, arguably. So yeah, C- on the cusp of a D+. This is RackAttack. RackAttack was probably one of the better Vegas players, in my opinion, for what it, well, I should say Paris, because they're still Paris back then, but you get the idea. It's not saying much because they sucked, and I think they only won a couple of maps after transitioning to this new lineup. But I thought he was one of the guys that at least, you know, tried to keep up, so maybe we'll give him a C-, because I feel bad for Eternal fans and how bad I've been roasting them in these tier lists. RuPaul. RuPaul, I don't know if he's quite like A. You could maybe argue A, but I thought RuPaul was really solid, man. I really liked what he showed on Florida, coming up as a mid-season pickup, in a way replacing Sir Majed outside of the playoff meta, you know, as the more favorable and, what's the word I'm looking for, stable option at the flex support role. His Baptiste was cracked, and quite arguably like top 3 in the league. Like, he was that disgusting on BAP. I appreciate what he did in a short amount of time on this team. Made a big difference. Helped them be better. Absolutely. So I feel pretty comfortable giving RuPaul like a B+. I think his impact was maybe a little stronger than Admiral's and about, you know, around the same level of Crimzo. So we'll give RuPaul a B+. Shu, this is pretty easy. He just goes straight into S. Some might say he's better than Fielder. I thought Fielder was a little better this year personally. Maybe it's just because Dallas were so darn good. But still, Shu's a god. He's got to be in the S. What you have to keep in mind, I say it all the time, but he was literally the only player on his role, both main and flex combined, to represent the MVP ballot. That's pretty significant. That goes to show that not a lot of people were looking towards the back line this year, but Shu was still doing enough to catch people's eyes, and I mean, understandably so. Why heal when you could just kill everything yourself? You hear me? Like, BAP, you know, it's absolutely cracked still for him. Good Ana, good everything. Shu could do absolutely no wrong, and we saw what happened whenever he didn't play, right? During the Summer Showdown, I mean, it's not his fault because, you know, you want to have your Lucio and your Brig player playing a Lucio Brigitte meta, but still, when he wasn't there, when Shu was missing, they just weren't as good of a team. Like, very obviously, he is their glue. He's the main reason why they were as good as they were, in my honest opinion. I know Kevstar deserves a lot of credit too, but without Shu, I just don't think they are what they ended up being. Anyway, Sir Majed. I think just based on the fact that they were like favored RuPaul in most metas after they got him, I don't think I can put Majed higher than RuPaul. I still think that Majed was good, but he had a very risky style of play. I think I'll put him like B, you know, like B to B-. But the thing with Majed was he had a very risky style that was maybe a turnoff for some people. Statistically, he did die quite a bit. His death rate was amongst some of the highest in the league, at least at support. But in return for that, he did make a lot of plays. I will give him that. Like, that's the trade-off. You know, that's the drawback. That's the risk you're taking. You're taking these aggro positions to try and make those extra plays to push your team over the top. And to be fair, it did work at times. You know, the aggressive Ana angles, the going in front lining as Zen. Like, it did work, and he had a lot of great moments. But due to the team's success and more, you know, just better consistency with RuPaul, I'm going to put Majed, you know, around Animo level. You know, whether you want to do that doesn't really matter. You get the point, though. Skairipa. Skairipa was pretty alright. Some people hated him, some people thought he was underrated. I thought he was fine. He did what he could on a Vancouver team that struggled greatly. The one issue is, the one time they were at their best, he wasn't playing. This is when Aztec came in. You could argue maybe it's just because the DPS meta worked better for them and they're at a more stable environment in general. But overall, the team still did prefer Skairipa. So I think him and Aztec are like pretty interchangeable, you know? Just okay. He didn't really stand out much and did not have like a lot of highlight level plays, if you will. But I thought there were some supports that were way worse, so he's around here. You could argue Aztec's better if you want to, but the one time Aztec played was when main supports were being played. If we're going off of flex supports, Skairipa was usually in, so. C for Skairipa. Skewed. Skewed's a toughie because he still was good, but he definitely felt, not quite as strong as his rookie season. I still appreciate Skewed's efforts. He looked damn good with Shu and any sort of double flex support combination still. And whether it was when the Glads were winning with him playing Brig or losing in the Summer Showdown, he was never the problem. Individually, Skewed was always an absolute beast of a player. So I feel pretty comfortable still giving him like a B+, or maybe an A-. We'll put him A- for now. Superich. Superich was another very mid-support player. It kind of sucks the C is like really starting to get giant, but the fact of the matter is there were a lot of just mediocre / okay support players this year. Superich, I thought was like maybe a little better than Irony, a little more important. Still not very great. I still think Superich was pretty bleh. I did not care for him. It's like the same vein again as like your Faiths, your Fixas, your Nishas. It's the same exact thing. Same exact thing. I'll put him like above Irony, though I think he was a bit more important. He did show at least a little bit of worth in the playoffs, but I just wasn't impressed, especially, thinking about all the hype he had as a, player in contenders in the Chinese scene. He was really good, but, he denied a contract with Chengdu, didn't get a shot till a year later, and maybe that costed him and, his confidence as well as some other things, his skill. Just wasn't really that impressive to me. Teru. Yes, this is Teru. There was no Teru in a Spark uniform. I apologize for that. But Teru, I think, really made a strong impact on the Spark. Even when they sucked when he joined, he still had some highlight plays, and then come playoff time, his Kiriko was kind of crazy. But it is a pretty small sample size. I will give you that. It's not a ton of games to go off of. I thought Teru was just decent. Like, I appreciate what he did in the playoffs, but that's just one meta. So I'll probably give Teru like a high B, maybe like above Monk, just because he really did play out of his mind in the playoffs. Twilight. Maybe not as much of a hard carry compared to like 2019, 2020, let's say, but still very reliable. You can always count on Twilight to pop off and do his thing. And I definitely think he was better than Showrong. Very reliable on like Anna and Brigitte as well. He showed a lot of improvement on over time. I give him credit there. His Brig I wasn't impressed with at first in the Summer Showdown, but as Toronto gained confidence, he played a lot better. And I think a big reason why we saw Toronto improve and make that run is because he showed that improvement. And I do think he was more impactful than Showrong, so I will be moving Showrong down. I might even move Chorong more so like here. I think that's probably something I like a little more. No, it's probably about right. I'll do something like that. UltraViolet. UltraViolet is an interesting case because I thought he started off about as good as you could for a rookie flex support player. Atlanta in those first few weeks really benefited from his Ana play. His bio nades and his sleeps were absolutely ridiculous. But as time went on, I felt like his stock went down and down and down, and it never really went back up. There was never that loop on there's never that loop on that roller coaster where he went back up, you feel me? But it might still be enough to warrant like a A-, because I do think that UltraViolet was still really good. It's just, I can't really say he's like high A because of the fall off we saw after like the first half of the season, let's say. Still really good though, and I think he should probably be in the A range. Who is this? Unique? Oh god, I mean, just considering that the Charge dumped him mid-season, he was terrible. Unique was one of the worst players on the Charge, hands down. So we're immediately throwing him into the D, like, without any sort of hesitation. He sucked. So that's where he shall go. Do I think he's maybe better than Myeongbong? I mean, I guess. Doesn't really matter. Vigilante. Vigilante's hard because I thought when he did play, he was, like, in the upper tiers for sure. Just, like, mechanics and value to a team. It's just that he didn't play all that much at times. He had his moments on Washington, but a lot of the time when he played on Washington, he only got to play Brig, which he was fine at, by the way. And then he got traded, and he was more so of a specialist. Like, he turned 18, played a little bit, traded, and then because UltraViolet and OGE have their synergy together, you can't exactly always put Vigilante in whenever you want to. So you had to be very select with the type of compositions you could play him with, but he still was damn good when he did get the opportunity to. I just wish I got to see more of him. Like, I didn't get to see enough of him, so I'm going to just throw him into the A range. Because I do think he was nasty when he did play, and he made a huge difference. He's got to be an A. It's just I can't put him too high because of the lack of gameplay. This is... I'm drawing a blank. Vindaim. Vindaim, in my opinion, was S tier. Maybe some people disagree with me, but I think he should have won a Roll Star Award over Izayaki, and I'm still salty he didn't get one. Vindaim had one of the most important jobs of any of the contending teams this year, like, hands down. The Seoul Dynasty had a bunch of solid players on their team. He was the big question mark. Could he come in as a rookie and lead them and be consistent? And he did. And he did more than what was asked of him, I feel like. There are a lot of questions about whether he was good on Lucio and things off of Brig, but he proved himself over and over and over again and continued to be one of the best main supports in OWL. I'd say him and Chio are like in a shootout for number one, personally. He was a monster player. Lucio, Brig, and I mean, he even flexed onto Zen and was kind of nasty on him. Like, I won't even lie to you. I love how Vindaim played, and he's just a solid S. Violet. A guy that you might argue belongs in S tier, depending on who you're talking to, just because he still managed to be so good while playing on a completely foreign role to him for the most part. Like, he had a little bit of experience playing like Brig and I think Mercy from time to time in previous years, but it wasn't a lot. He didn't really play a ton of Lucio, like, fully for a whole season. This was his first go-around with that, and he did well. He held his own. I'm not going to sit here and tell you he was the best main support in OWL, but man, he charged up those beats fast with a lot of healing, super aggressive angles, always poking people. He did a great job of outpacing main supports and getting super fast beats, which ultimately helped the Shock just be a better team and win those critical fights because he was outpacing his opponent so much. I think impact-wise, Violet's probably higher than Twilight. But I think he was better than, like, LeeJaeGon and FunnyAstro. I don't know if I'd go that far. I'll probably put Violet, like, there. I mean, he also was pretty nasty anytime the Shock played double flex support. Like, on Circuit Royale, oh my god. Him and Finn were just this unstoppable duo. Whether it be the Zen, the BAP, Violet still has it, and it's just very impressive that he could flex on the dime like that and just still look as good as ever despite practicing a new role. So that's an easy A. Speaking of easy A's, I'm actually going to go ahead and put our final guy, Xerneas, in A as well. Xerneas deserves a lot of credit. He came into this Charge team mid-season and helped them just be way, 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 way better. It was a night and day difference, and he helped them ultimately make a push for the play-ins. Like, he's a big reason why. Obviously, Jimmy was important, giving Choisehwan better help, all of that stuff, and getting Piggy as well. But, bro, Xerneas makes such a massive difference. He might have been one of the most important players on the Guangzhou Charge. His Lucio was freaking nuts. His Brig was freaking nuts. And even his Zen was cracked. I won't even lie to you. I thought Xerneas put in the absolute work this year. I think he is a solid A-tier player. Maybe even above Lastro, to be honest. No, I'll put him above Lastro. I thought Xerneas was crazy, man. Xerneas did so much for this charge team in such little time and helped elevate them to a brand new level that none of us thought they'd ever be able to reach. Xerneas was just absolutely hungry all year. And honestly, since like halfway through 2021, he has been playing out of his mind. Xerneas is a god tier player, and I'm so glad the charge picked him up. So yeah, that's pretty much what the list is looking like right now. We have a lot of people in A tier. This is kind of wild. Huh. Do I feel comfortable putting Landon this high? I might put Landon like here, maybe. No, I'll probably put Landon here. I do think Landon was really good. No, I changed my mind. I'll put creative there. I might even put Chorong above him as well, actually. I'll put Landon right there. That looks a lot better to me. Yeah, I'm pretty happy with this list, though. For those of you who, watch the stream, you'll probably realize this is a new list. I wasn't happy with the original one, so you did a second one. I feel a lot happier about this one. Hope you enjoyed it. That's kind of going to conclude our three-parter for 2022 player tier list. I do hope that you enjoyed it. And if you maybe want more tier list content soon, let me know down in the comments below. Let me know what you think of this list. I'll leave a link to it in the description if you want to try it for yourself. This has been ATP. Hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace out.